Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at the second story from chapter 28 of the Road to Latin textbook called De Romae Principiis I. Now, if you want more information on this chapter, I know I mentioned this in all the videos, feel free to go to Nova Latin. You can find everything you need for vocab, grammar explanations, practice problems, everything you'd want to find to just help you understand the story and the grammar of this chapter a little bit better. Feel free to check it out. It's always there for you. Now, like I always tell you, before you dive too far into these stories, the first thing you want to do is make sure you have the vocab and grammar really, really set and under control. Now, since this is the second story of chapter 28, I'm going to assume that you're feeling pretty good about both. But if you need a refresher for vocab, you can always go to my textbook and find Quizlets, things like that to help you. In terms of the grammar, I went through it in the last video, some of the basics. But if you want a quick overview, I would encourage you to just check out my other video. If you just like search in my channel, you'll find it. I have a video about how you conjugate the perfect tense. It gives you an overview of everything. That's probably your simplest bet and able to be able to figure this out. All right. So if you want some review, feel free to check it out there. The other thing that I'd say is whenever you do a story from the textbook or really any Latin, you want to probably use what we call the read and reread method. So you want to read through it once, try to understand and absorb everything. If there's anything you don't know, right, any words, grammar, write it down on a list. Then once you're done reading, you can go back. Vocab is very easy. You just look up what the words mean and you should be set there. But in terms of grammar, you might have to dig a little bit, but try to see where you're going wrong and understand what the problem is, right? Then you go back, you read the story again on the second, third time, however many times it takes you to do. You should be able to read this story without needing any vocab help or having to look up any grammar. And if you can read through it and understand it without having to, look anything up, that means you're in a really good place and you're ready to move on. Another thing I'd encourage you to do is if you can find a classmate, right, someone in class, feel free to partner up with them, read the story to them so you can work on your speaking and your pronunciation, and then have them read it back to you so you can work on your listening. You never want to shut those skills off. I know I say it in every video, but it's really, really important. You don't want to just sit here and translate in your head. One, that's how you make mistakes, and two, that's not how language works, right? So you want to treat Latin as a language. You want to bring it to life, speak it, listen to it, read it. All those things will just help you understand. Whenever you're at a point where you feel like you understand it really well, continue on with the video. If you're not there, feel free to pause this, go back, do what you got to do, and then come back to this video. But the second half here, I'm going to walk you through the story. And if your translation is pretty close to mine, doesn't have to be exactly the same, but pretty close, you can feel that you're on the right track and you probably have a really good understanding of how this chapter and the stories work, and you can move on. All right, so let's dive in now. The story again is continuing what we did with the first story from chapter 28, which is about Aeneas, right? This famous Roman hero from the Trojan War. So we start with this. You have Aeneas erat dux Clarus et Pius. Okay, so Aeneas, and by the way, if you're wondering why his name looks weird, it's because it's a Greek name, right? So this is nominative. It looks a little bit weird. It doesn't have an A ending, but don't worry about it. It is nominative, I promise. So you're saying Aeneas was a dux Clarus, right? He was a famous and a pious, a pious leader. Now, the word pious means it doesn't necessarily mean kind of what we think today, like religious, but it does have that idea of being devoted to the gods, your country, your family. All these things are kind of wrapped into the word pious or pious in Latin. Okay, so he was not only famous, but he was very like dedicated to the gods in his family. You have virtus Aeneae erat magna. So the virtue of Aeneas was great. And again, virtus is another interesting word to try to translate in Latin. In English, we'd say virtue, but it has to do with your character and kind of being a man. You can see the word wir in there, right? Manliness. It doesn't mean you're sort of like a fake tough guy. It just means you do the right thing, right? Which is kind of where you get virtue in English. So the virtue of Aeneas was great. Ubi Graeci magnis ignibus Troiam deleverant, cum uxore Creusa et filio Ascanio et patre Anchisa ex urbe fugit. Okay, so you're saying when the Greeks they deleverant, they destroyed. There's your perfect tense verb, right? The erant gives it away. When they destroyed Troy, magnis ignibus, with great flames, great fires, right? It's your ablative. You have he fled, fugit, meaning at the very end, Aeneas fled with cum. Remember, cum always takes the ablative. So you have cum uxore Creusa, right, with his wife Creusa and his son Ascanius and his patre, his father Anchises, right? They fled, or he fled ex urbe, from the city. So on his way out, he grabs his family, right, because he is dedicated to his family, right, as anyone would probably do. Then you have pater erat aeger et invalidus, itaque Aeneas humeris patrem ad ora maritimam portave. So his father, his pater, was aeger, was kind of weak, sick. You could translate that, right? He was, I guess you'd say, weak is probably the best way to do it. So you're saying his father was sick or weak, right? And while it is kind of has the same meaning, like weak. So I guess if you put them together, you could say his father was sick and weak. Kind of one way to do it. His father can't walk. If I remember right in the Aeneid, that's the actual story. He's not able to walk, and so itaque Aeneas, right? Aeneas, he portawit, he carried, again, perfect tense, you can tell by the V in the middle of it, right? So he carried his patrim, his father, umeris, on his shoulders, right? There's your ablative again. So he carried his father on his shoulders ad ora maritimam, to the shore of the sea or to the seashore. So they're fleeing Troy and he's carrying his father on his back. If you look to the right, this is a famous painting of Aeneas fleeing Troy, and you can see the little boy is Ascanius. The old man on his shoulders is his father Anchises, and you have Creusa running in the background too. Okay. Then you have Ascanium, Parvum, Filium, Dextra, Duxit, Uxor post Aeneam, Properavit. So the verb here is Duxit, he led, right? And again, perfect tense, you can tell by the X. So he led Ascanius, his Parvum Filium, his small son, Dextra, with his right hand. Okay, so dextra, think like ambidextrous has to do with your hands. It really is a directional here. So his right hand. Okay, so he led his son, right, little Ascanius, with his right hand, and his wife, his uxor, properavit, hastened, is the verb here, and again, perfect tense because of the V in the middle. So his wife hastened after Aeneas, right, post Aenea. Okay, so the wife is Creusa, and again, all these verbs are perfect tense. Then we continue. Per multa tela et magnus ignes properaverant et tandem ad oram pervenerant. So through many, tela is like weapons, right? So through many weapons, you could say, and great fires, magnus ignes. So the multa tela is neuter, which is why the a is accusative, right? So per, meaning through, as a preposition, takes the accusative. Multa tela is neuter, accusative plural. That's why you have the a ending. So it's saying they hastened propaverunt, meaning all of them, they hastened through many weapons and great fires. The many weapons probably is talking about like arrows, right? People throwing things at them is kind of the idea. So they're escaping from the burning city. And finally, tandem, pervenerunt, they reached, right, or they arrived at the shore, ad ora. And again, pervenerunt is perfect tense, right? The erunt ending in the V in the middle of propaverunt is also perfect. So these two verbs are both in the past. So they hastened and they reached. Then you have ibi multi homines fuerunt. So there, multi homines, many men or many people, fuerunt. This is the perfect tense, the third principal part of the verb sum esse, an irregular verb. So you can translate it as there were, right? So there were many people, many men, however you want to translate homines, right? Many refugees from Troy. Said Creusa afuit, but Creusa was absent, right? So afuit again is perfect tense, with abesse meaning to be away or to be absent. So you can translate this as she was absent. Okay, so Creusa is missing. Aeneas maxime lacrimavit et clamavit, ubi Creusa es. So Aeneas, he cried, right, lacrimavit, and he shouted, and he cried maxime, so like very much or very greatly. So he very much, you could say, he cried very much, and he shouted out. And he says, ubi es, that means where are you? And it also, there's a hint that he's talking to Creusa here because Creusa has commas around it, it's vocative. So he's saying, where are you, Creusa? He's talking to him. Then you have quo cucuristi, right? Where did you run to, right? So the quo kind of means something like to where, you could say. The cucuristi, that kukuri is this duplication of that, the cu, right? That happens in perfect tense. It's the verb kuro kurre, right? To run. And the isti ending also gives it away as being perfect. So he's saying, to where did you run? So the first verb is present, where are you? Then he says, where did you run to, or to where did you run? And then he continues, and he says, cur tu socios reliquisti. So why did you, reliquisti is going to be perfect tense here, the isti ending. So why did you leave behind your socios, your allies, right, your people? Then you have num meam creusam amisi, right? So num here, he's asking a yes or no question where he's expecting the answer to be no, right? So he's saying like, did I amisi, did I leave behind or did I lose? Rather, you might say, did I lose my creusa? Right? He's almost saying like, no, like I didn't do that, right? Then and again, amisi is perfect tense. So he says, did I lose my creusa? He's kind of talking to himself. Then you have fatane uxorem rapuerant. So did the fates, so fata here is talking about the fates, like plural, right? And you can tell because the verb here is rapuerant, which is third person plural. So it's not talking about fate, that would be fatum. This is the plural, right? Neuter plural. So he's saying, did the fates, and again, the any on fatane means he's asking yes or no question where he's not sure what the answer is. So he says, did the fates, rapuerant, snatch away or snatch up muxora, my wife? Right, so he's asking all these questions, right? His head spinning. Says, did the fates take my wife? Then he says, sorry, let me say that again. We distisne soki meam uxorem. So he turns to his soki. That's your vocative. Again, he's talking about. So the istis, right? You want to think e istia emis istis error. This is second person plural. So he says, did you see or did you all see? Perfect tense. Soki, allies, he's talking to them. He says, hey, allies, did you see Mea Muxora, my wife? Right? And again, the any on we distisne means he's not sure if the answer is going to be yes or no. He's genuinely asking, did you all see my wife? And then it finishes with this. You have Creusa autem non responded. So Creusa, however, did not respond, right? He doesn't get a response from Creusa. He doesn't hear anything. Okay. Aeneas patrem et filium reliquit et ad urbem cucure. So Aeneas, he left behind reliquit, right? And if you're not sure if that's perfect or present, I know the IT can be a little tricky. If you look at the next verb, cucurit is very definitely perfect. So you can imply if cucurit is perfect tense, reliquit is probably also perfect tense. So he left behind his patrem et filium, his father and his son, and he cucurit, he ran ad urbem to the city. Okay, so he runs back to Troy. Uxorum known in Wayne. He did not find his wife, his Uxorum. Tandem miser ad socios rewene. So finally, or at last, the miserable person, miser is what we call a substantive adjective, right? So it's not describing anything. You can imply the word man because it's talking about Aeneas. So you can say the miserable man finally rewene, went back or came back to his allies, ad socios. So he gives up. Then you have tum naves edificavit, right? So then he built. Edificavit is perfect tense. You can tell by the V in the ending, right? So then he built naves, ships, meaning he, as in Aeneas and all his allies, right? Aeneas isn't single-handedly building ships. That would be impressive. It's really talking about all of them. So he built ships, meaning he kind of led his people to build ships. Postea Aeneas soci que ad Italiam navigaverat. So afterward, Aeneas and his allies, Soci, right? The que just means and. So Aeneas and his allies, navigaverat, they sailed ad Italiam to Italy. Okay, and again, navigaverat is perfect tense. So this is another good story for just practicing your perfect tense. You get a lot of repetition of different verbs, and I think they hit on all the different persons too. So first, second, third, singular, and plural. So this is a really good chance to practice recognizing perfect tense and translating it. So take it that way, right? You should just use this as practice for perfect tense. The other thing that it's good for is giving you a hint at the Aeneid, right? This very, very famous story. I'll put a link in the description of this video too. If you want, on Nova Latin, I have a section where you can learn all about Aeneas, his journey and founding the city of, or sorry, the Latin people, the Roman people. So you'll see how Aeneas and Romulus and Remus kind of tie together. The Aeneid is a very, very famous epic poem by Virgil. And if you stick in Latin, it usually shows up on the AP curriculum. I know they're changing it, but it'll still be there. So it's something you'll run into eventually. But it's a good chance to get a little culture too. Either way, hopefully this made sense to you. If you have any questions at all on the translation, how to read it, anything at all, perfect tense, whatever, feel free to put it in the comments below and I'll help you. But otherwise, just keep practicing, keep reading it, and you should be okay. Good luck.